All right, folks, we're going to call to order our first hearing of the evening. This is August 23rd, 2017, and this is a 7:30 application. It's of Kenneth Wick and Juliet Harbridge. It's dated June 22nd, 2017, and the applicants are seeking variances from two sections of the bylaws. They're proposing to build an open deck to the rear of their single-family house at 46 Essex Road in Milton, and the side yard requirements 20 feet from the property sideline, and here the applicants are proposing to construct the deck 14 feet 4 inches from the right side lot line, and the rear requirement is formulaic, and when you do the formula, the rear distance is supposed to be 17 feet 6 inches, and the applicants are proposing 8 feet 3 inches from the rear property line. This property is in the Residence C district. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening is Board Member Kathleen O'Donnell and Board Member Nicholas Gray. The rules of the board are such that we'll hear from the applicant, then we'll hear from people who have questions of the applicant, people who wish to speak in support of the applications for variances or wish to oppose the applications. We are televising the proceedings tonight, but the official record is the tape recording and not the television. So I would ask that before anyone speaks, you're going to have to come up here, sit in front of the microphone. The microphone does not project. It's just for making the recordings to the TV. So that would ask that you tell us your name and address and speak up nice and loud and clear so we can have an accurate record of the proceeding. So we're going to have as evidence for this proceeding the application dated June 21, 2017, to which is attached Mr. Prondak's denial letter. It's dated June 14, 2017, and we have a plot plan of the property by Michael Paul Antonino. It's dated May 19, 2017, showing the subject property, its location on Essex Street and Crown Street, and the various dimensional requirements that are set forth in the application. I don't believe we've received any specific letters from anybody regarding this application, so I think without further ado, who's going to be making the presentation on behalf of the applicants? Oh, Mrs. McEtrick isn't. I think you live on Crown, don't you? Okay, well, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Keith Wick.
Okay, just keep your voice up, Mr. Wick, if you would, and you are?
Julia Harbridge.
Good. Well, welcome to the Board of Appeals. We're delighted to hear from you. Why don't you tell us about your project, what variances you're looking for, and why the board should vote favorably in support of your application.
We would like to put a 12-foot by 19-foot deck off the back of our house. Given that it's a corner lot in an area of town where there's not a lot of yard space, we need the variance. I know that with the formula, it asks for 17 feet from the property line. When you look at our property line, it's only about 20 feet total. So if we were to put anything kind of off the back of our house, it would be 3 feet, which is essentially almost useless. So we would ask for the variance as something that we think would, be nice for us to be able to walk out on a back deck in our neighborhood. It's not exactly, we don't have a lot of property kind of around our houses, so we kind of see them as places to gather. We do have a letter from our direct abutter in the back who we feel would mostly be impacted by this, and that is Mr. and Mr. Whipple, who are in support of our project. They know that it kind of would overlook their property, particularly one of their front side windows, but they still see it as a benefit to kind of our property as well as kind of the neighborhood.
Okay, why don't you just give me 2 seconds, and that'll allow you to gather your thoughts again, and let me just, I'm not going to read this verbatim, but let me read the substance of what the Whipples have to say. It's dated August 15th, 2017. It's to the Board of Appeals. We're writing as abutters to the applicants in support their request to build a deck to the rear of their home. The deck will be facing their property. I'll read this part verbatim. Keith and Juliet are wonderful neighbors. And this improvement to the house will add value to the property, to the quality of their life, but it also enhances the neighborhood. The neighborhood is unique. The neighbors are close and socialize informally on the street and in each other's backyards, porches, and decks frequently. This is a unique neighborhood. The deck will provide space for outdoor socializing for family and friends. We don't have any concerns about disruption during the construction. There's a fence between our home and where the deck will be. Is that a solid fence, by the way, or is it a chain link? Solid, okay. And she hopes, Marilyn and Mark Whipple hope that the Zoning Board of Appeals will permit the addition of the deck. And they provide us, they're at 52 Crown Street, and they provide us with their telephone number and their Gmail account number. So we thank the Whipples for submitting that lovely letter.
We also have there's really 2 houses that will have any view into our backyard whatsoever. One is the Whipples, and then a little bit further, because she's across the street, is our neighbor, Donna Grublock, who also came
Oh, that's nice. Okay.
in support, so.
And are you going to be addressing the board, Donna?
Would you like me to do that now?
Let's hold on and we'll let the Whipples, not the Whipples, Ms. Harbridge and Keith, let them finish their presentation, and then we'll get to you. So do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think
Okay, let me ask you some questions, and you may think of something you want to add. You have not filed a schematic of what the deck is going to look like, other than the little piece on the Mr. Antonino's plot plan. So can you, other than the dimensions of the deck, do you want to tell us how high off the ground it is? Is it going to be made out of real wood or composite? Is it going to be painted? Are there railings around the deck? Is there going to be a roof on the top of the deck? Are there stairways to the deck? Or are you just going to access the deck from your home?
the deck will probably be approximately 3 feet off the ground. It'll be so that we can step.
Do you have plans? Do you have a
No, we don't have
picture
a
of the
plan.
deck, or-
No, because we didn't think we could get somebody to give us a plan if we weren't going to get the variance in order to build the deck. We thought that was the way that we'd go about
So
it.
your deck is going to be about around 3 feet
Yep.
above ground,
Wood,
and it's going to be wood. What kind of wood?
Ipe, hopefully, is the plan.
Okay. And are there going to be railings around the deck?
Yeah.
Yes.
So there'll be railings and 2 stair access.
And spindles too, I assume you have. What are you going to put?
I'm actually kind of leaning more towards those new, the way they're using
The cables?
the cables. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, the red cables.
Honestly, the inspiration also is that when we are in our backyard, we see an almost identical deck in Donna's backyard.
Okay.
But her yard is narrow and deep, so her deck could be built far from the back line. Our yard is more wide and shallow. So while our decks will be about the same size and protrude about the same distance from the back of the house, our yard is shaped in a way that will bring it closer to the back property line.
Okay. And are you going to have an awning on top of the deck?
No.
Or are you going to paint the deck?
Stain
Stain it?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there going to be lattices on the bottom
on
of
the
the deck?
bottom, yep, around the base of it.
How about stairs going into the backyard?
So there's be stairs on the side of the property that faces Crown Street. There's as the fence goes, there's an opening for the fence, so there'll be a small stair access that goes along the side of the house there. So that
Is that going to change the dimension of the variance you're requesting?
No,
It's not.
no.
Aren't the stairs part of the structure?
The stairs will be set into the deck.
Oh, I see.
Stairs.
So actually, the stairs aren't going to be added onto the deck? They're going to be basically part of the dimensions of the deck you have here?
yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a sketch of these?
I have
Stairs?
of what,
a sketch.
inset stairs?
Yeah,
No.
okay, so the inset stairs. Okay, new to me, but that's fine.
So rather than having,
I have a lot of pictures of them on my Pinterest page.
No, we don't want to go there. All right. No, we don't want to go there. But see, one of the difficulties is if we give variances,
Yep.
we usually tie them into some type of a sketch or a plan so that Mr. Prondak or his colleagues in the office, when they go out to see what was built, know what you were proposing and see that it is built as is. But that's all right. Let's go on. I'm asking these questions because I know Mr. Gray is going to ask a lot of these technical questions too. So I'm trying to speed things up a little bit.
Always a troublemaker.
You have access to the deck off of the rear of your house?
Yes, yep.
Okay. And I suppose you're telling us that because of the unusual shape of your deck, it requires relief from the variance because that's the nature of your hardship. You've got this quirky-looking,
Lot.
quirky-shaped
Very
lot.
weird
Yeah,
lot.
lot, not
Yep.
deck, yeah.
Yes, lot.
Lot. He meant lot.
You've got a quirky lot.
Yep.
Okay.
Very quirky.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add in support of your application?
I don't think so.
You could ask Mrs. McGetrick, and she may. Let's hear.
She has an odd shape. Do you know?
You have a hard-shaped lot too, Marion?
We all have odd
Oh,
shapes.
that's Crown Street. That must be quite
That
a
is
place.
the neighborhood.
Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Ms. O'Donnell, please.
I did have one question about the deck. I understand is sort of 3 feet off the ground, and you have a fence dividing your property from the Whipples, and I'm wondering what's the height of the fence that they have? So is there no issue with the deck being the same height as their fence?
it's our fence, and it goes along the entire back line of the property line and then goes up Crown Street. So the fence height is approximately, I'd say, around 6 feet high.
6 feet.
Okay.
And it's a solid fence?
Yeah.
Okay, what is it made out of? Do you know? It's wood, solid wood. Okay, is it painted?
No, it's regular, like,
Weathered.
Weathered gray.
yeah.
Okay. Mr. Gray, please.
I don't think I have any questions, and you already covered this, but I'm just going to be redundant about it because I don't want them to inadvertently build something that. I just want to make sure if we approve this, we approve what you actually need. So I want to get back to the staircase, right? The little plot plan shows the deck at 12 feet one way and 19 feet long. That 19-foot dimension includes where the stairs are going to end, right? Absolutely positively, so that you're not going to be intruding any more. You won't be any closer to that property line than 14.4 feet, including the stairs, right?
No, the way we look at it is the deck is square.
Yep.
And then there's a small section where, rather than the deck coming all the way to the corner, that's where the stairs start. So the stairs kind of take up part of, so the deck is almost like part of an L shape, and the stairs go up into the deck.
Got it. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Great. If you have nothing else to add, let's see if, is there anybody present tonight who has any questions of the applicants or otherwise wishes to speak in support of this application for variances? Yes. Why don't you come on up?
I really don't
You
know.
can slide over here if you want, Mr. Wick and Ms. Hobbs. You can just slide over here if you want.
I don't know if I can say anything more eloquent than the Whipples already said.
How about telling us your name and address? That's a good start.
That's very eloquent. Donna Rulback,
How do you spell your last name?
Reulbach, and I'm at 54 Essex. So I'm right across Crown from Keith and Juliet.
Great.
So my deck looks over to their house. And their fence really does shield a lot from their yard, so you don't really see much in their yard. And they are fabulous neighbors. They're very involved with other neighbors, helping them, shoveling their driveways, helping people with their cars. Keith. Well, Juliet bakes for everyone.
He shovels.
So it,
Except the Board of Appeals, apparently. Cookies or anything.
so they really couldn't be better neighbors.
Bribes. That's wonderful.
I'm in full support of their request.
Good. Welcome to the board. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. Is there anybody else out there who would like to speak in support of the application? Mrs. McGettrick, welcome to the Board of Appeals, a frequent presenter before the board.
I'm Mary McKettrick. I live at 10 Crown Street, which is 1 block away. I also live in a corner, and my lot is even more irregular and narrow. But all the lots in the neighborhood are very small. This lot is narrow, and the house is a nice colonial, beautifully situated. It's always been a really attractive property. And the backyard has always been a secret because it has a nice fence around it. You don't know what's going on there, and when this deck is built, you still won't know what's going on there. So it'll be great for the owners, but there should be no impact on anybody in the neighborhood. So I certainly support the application.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Marion. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard regarding this application in support of the application? Anybody present out there who either has questions of the applicant or wishes to speak in opposition to the applications for variances? Stony silence. So we'll take that as nobody wishes to be heard. Do you want to say anything else in support of your application? Marion would advise you to quit while you're ahead. Okay, so that's good. Thank you very much. We're going to close the evidence at this hearing, and you can stay right there. Under the open meeting law, we're obliged to discuss this application in open session and vote on it here and now. So that's what we intend to do.
Okay. I would vote in favor. I agree that the configuration of the lot is difficult. I appreciate the fact that there is already a fence, and I am glad that the next-door neighbor has submitted a letter in support, because they'd be the only people that would actually be affected. So I'd vote in favor.
Okay, Mr. Gray.
I concur. I would tend to I would tend to vote in favor as well. This is the type of project we often see and very often approve. It would be good to have had a little bit more in the way of a plan so that we could tie the decision into it. But I think based on the description you both provided and the testimony from your neighbors, I think it would be fine.
Okay. Mr. Gray is a real estate lawyer in Boston, so he likes plans. But I think you presented a wonderful application. The lot is quirky. It's really odd shaped, and there's really not much you can do in that backyard without getting multiple variances. The Whipples to the rear have sent us a letter. They agree. It sounds like a wonderful neighborhood. It sounds like a wonderful project. I agree with Nick. It may have been a little more complete if we have a sketch of what the deck is supposed to look like, but we've got enough here that we have the exterior dimensions, and whoever writes the decision here can talk about the deck being approximately 3 feet off the ground, and the lattice work, and whatever Kathleen suggested the railings were going to look like.
Cables.
Cables. And so I think that would be sufficient
Low visual
What's this old
impact.
council lot?
specificity for Mr. Prondak. So with that having been said, all those in favor of granting the two requested variances, please say aye.
Aye.
Well, congratulations on your variances. Let me tell you, let me ask you a couple of questions. When are you going to build the deck? I know you're going to say sooner rather than later.
I imagine we'll start to work on it within the next month, hopefully before ground starts to get cold and freezing.
Okay, because the procedure here, or the protocol is that we're going to have to write a decision here. It takes us 10 to 14 days to write these decisions, and then it gets filed with the, it gets recorded with the town clerk, and then there's a 20-day appeal period. So even though nobody has opposed your variance application here, there's technically somebody could appeal within the 20-day period. It'd be a very weak appeal, but technically they can do it. Once the 20-day appeal period ends, your variance becomes fixed and final, and you should or your builder should record a copy of the variances in the Registry of Deeds, because you have to keep your title up to date, otherwise somebody's liable to say, how did they build that deck? Well, you just look at the Registry of Deeds, and if you're selling your property, it'll make sure that your deck is a legal deck, okay? But Mr. Prondak can help you there as to how you do it. Most builders know how to do it. Are you building this yourself, or are you going to... You are going to build it yourself. Okay. Then talk to Mr. Prondak about recording the variances. We'll do our best to get this done in a timely fashion, and congratulations on your variances.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to
Very
this.
much. And thank you for your time. I know you guys all volunteer, so thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's fine. Whatever. I'll take it. Or I'll wait, or I'll defer.
Thank you. Mrs. McGettrick, on this second application, are you pursuing the two uses? The
Well,
school?
we'll talk to you about that. We have a question about one of the second part of the
Okay,
application.
okay. So I'll read it as advertised. How's that? Okay, great. So we're going to call to order our second hearing of the evening. This is the application of the East Congregational Church and the Reverend Shelley Davis, who are the applicants. The application is dated June 30, 2017, and they seek variances from two sections of the Board of Appeals. They want to be allowed to lease existing kitchen facilities at the church to private caterers to prepare food to be delivered to other locations. The applicants are also requesting to be allowed to lease 4 existing classrooms in the educational wing of the church to a private for-profit educational establishment at the religious facility located at 610 Adams Street in Milton. The bylaw prohibits commercial uses within certain residential districts. It does allow educational uses in certain districts, provided that the entity providing the education is a nonprofit educational corporation rather than a for-profit educational establishment. The church is located in the residential zoning district, and which is a C district. In addition to the application, we have the Board of Appeals the advertisement. We've got the Board of Appeals application. It's dated June 30, 2017. We have a denial letter by Mr. Prondak dated June 30th. Attached to, it looks like the application, we have a current existing site plan for the church. Looks like it's computer generated. Mrs. McGettrick has submitted her usual letter and brief on behalf of the church. It's dated June 30, 2017. And we also have some plans of the interior portions of the church property, which would be used for both of the proposed uses. It looks like there are 4 or 5 particular plans. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening to my immediate right is Board Member Nick Gray, and to my immediate left is Board Member Kathleen O'Donnell. Well, the rules are going to be the same as the first hearing. We'll hear from the applicant. We'll hear from people who have questions of the applicant, people who want to speak in support of the variance applications, people who wish to speak in opposition to the variance applications. I think on this one we did receive one letter? Three. Okay. Do you have the other here? Good. Let me take care of the, I'm sorry?
This one here.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I'm going to summarize these, but they're available to anyone who wants to hear them. The first one is really a relay from Kathleen O'Donnell, Kathleen O'Conlon, one of our selectmen. This was sent to her inadvertently, so she's redirected it to the Board of Appeals. And this is from a Mary Beth, looks like Chiaroli, and Patricia Chiaroli. And they write, thanking the Board of Selectmen for all of their hard work. So we agree. We second that. They do a lot of hard work. And then they say, with regard to the church's application, since they can't be present, they want to be very clearly, they want to express very clearly their own opinions on the proposal. We are indeed not in favor of the idea whatsoever. We do not need or want more traffic, noise, or business activities perpetuated by the East Congregational Church. Thanks for reading. So we thank the Chiarolis for their input. Now we have a...
It's unsigned.
Unsigned.
Well, we have an unsigned email, apparently. And it's the policy of the board that unless somebody either signs it or puts their name and address on it, we really don't give it any weight. So I'm not going to read this, and we're not going to consider it. It's not fair to anybody, and I don't know whether this is in support or in opposition, and I guess, frankly, I don't care. I don't want to sound trite, but we really need people to put the name and address on something for it to be weighed by the board. So we have a third email. This also was apparently submitted to the Board of Selectmen, and this one went to Mr. Wells, Richard Wells. And Katie Conlon again sent it to us. Okay, and this one is from Bettina, looks like Urquhart. Bettina does not give us her residential.
It's in the first.
It's in the first.
Oh, great. Yes, it is. Okay. So Bettina says that her husband and she live at 77 Granite Place. They have 2 young children. They moved to the neighborhood a couple of years ago. They began attending the East Church. Well, that's a positive thing. And they knew them because the East Church apparently has a lot of neighborhood picnics. They would throw at Crane Field, and this was great for their family movie nights, preschool dance classes, and a Russian math school, which they host. They seemed like exemplary neighbors. And now that we've become more of a part of the church, we're discovering what a community gem they are. So I'm writing as an abutter and someone who would like to see the East Church thrive in Milton. I'm sure everyone endorses that. To my dismay, we received an unsigned letter in our mailbox today encouraging us to oppose the variance request that would enable the church to use its kitchen facilities for private catering. I can't attend the Board of Appeals meeting because we're hosting out-of-town visitors, so I'm writing to voice our support of the variance. We've attended some church meetings in which the idea has been discussed. Church members also walked down the street this summer, going door to door, letting us know what they're considering, seeking feedback. As residents, we really appreciate that, and they think it's brilliant. I'm not sure whether that's the church candidates going down the street and talking to people, or whether they think the application for variance is brilliant. But they're both working parents, and life is hectic. The thought of being able to pick up a hot, healthy meal down the street sounds too good to be true. Would love to support local businesses in the church at the same time. The letter writer seems to imagine a much larger operation than what's proposed. We see it as the potential of the church to share its facilities for our neighborhood and community and be valuable and enriching. We do not oppose the request. We wholeheartedly support it. If you want to talk to us, please call us at blank, 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 blank. So great. We thank Bettina Urkalui, if I've mispronounced your name, please forgive me, for her letter. So I think without further ado, I told everyone we're recording the proceeding tonight. Speak up nice and loud and give us your name and address before you speak. So Mrs. McEtrick is representing the applicants for these apparently two variance requests. Welcome to the Board of Appeals, and we're delighted to have you back and delighted to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm also here with Pastor Shelley Davis, and if you don't mind, I'd like to invite her to come up with me to present our arguments in favor of this
Good. Welcome
request.
to the Board of Appeals.
I have given you a letter to support this application, which provided some details about the history of East Congregational Church. In my remarks, I want to briefly address a few more pieces of information that you don't necessarily have yet. One of them relates to the use by the Russian School of Mathematics. So just to say, historically, East Congregational Church has rented space for caterers in its kitchen. It was only a few years ago that they were both brought in by the Board of Health, which said you need to upgrade your kitchen facilities for this use because kitchen use for retail sale requires permitting from the Board of Health. And it's quite an onerous process. The kitchen had to be renovated. All kinds of improvements were made. And the kitchen is now up to meets Board of Health regulations for this use. Subsequent to doing that renovation, the building commissioner informed the church that they could not rent to private caterers without a variance. And the reason for that was that the church is in a residential zone. They are an allowed use as a church, but they can't do what a homeowner could do and apply for a special permit to have a catering business operate out of their own kitchen because they're not a home. They're a church. Well, some people would say a church is a sort of a home, but it isn't, strictly speaking. It's not a residential use. And so the church finds itself in a position of being unable to do something that a homeowner might be able to do through a special permit, which would be conditioned in a number of ways.
Do you agree with that a homeowner in a residential zone can use their residence for a commercial catering business?
It's an allowed use. It's a permitted use. It's not an allowed use. It's in our zoning bylaw.
Okay. Do you have a reference to it, Marion? I don't know that I picked that up.
I can look it up for you in a few minutes. But, I don't have it right in front of me, although I may have mentioned it in my memo. I probably didn't give you. It's in Section 3. I know that.
I was in court all day, so I didn't have a chance to
and the
review it.
point I'm making here is that this doesn't mean that anybody can just start running a catering business in their kitchen, as does happen. You have to have a special permit, and if you were to go in for the Board of Appeals for such a permit, the neighborhood would come to the hearing, and all concerns relating to whether there was enough room for an extra car or additional traffic, or whether the kitchen was up to code, so on and so forth. Those would all be explored in such a hearing. Permit wouldn't necessarily be granted, but it is a possibility for residents in a regular residential district in Milton. So that's kind of the basis for our coming before you, is to say that we would ask you to consider additional relief for the church of an appropriate level and intensity so as to not cause any intrusion on the neighborhood, but to allow the church to use its now upgraded kitchen facilities in a way that's useful to people in the community and really provides important revenue for the church, because they do need the additional support they can get from renting their facilities. For many years, this church has rented space to the Sunshine Nursery School. That's a nonprofit educational use. And when they rented to the Russian School for Mathematics, they also thought it was a nonprofit. They were asked, they just assumed.
And they were a profit.
When they are. So it turns out, not a legal use. And they would be in a situation before you tonight of saying, please give us relief and let this good program continue. But the Russian school has now notified them that they need more space and they're going to move out at the end of December. They are still renting to the Russian School for Mathematics, so I would ask you to consider the possibility of a very short-term variance or not. But, I mean, they're sort of in limbo now. They're renting to them, but it's not a legal use. I certainly would be more comfortable on their behalf if there could be a very limited permission granted just for the 3 or 4 months that remains
You know
in the
when
year.
it expires, when the lease?
And they said they're definitely,
End of
they're
December.
definitely moving out at the end of December.
And what other church are they going to, do you know?
May I speak?
Of course, you can speak it. The pastor can speak anytime.
No, not really.
No, I
Ask my congregation
think
about
you're
that.
probably right.
But my understanding is that they've found more of kind of a light commercial space that is near the Home Depot in Quincy. I mean, but it has to be built out and so forth. That's the last that the principal of the school indicated to me. So my understanding is they need more space than any church has to offer.
Okay.
So in addition, I'd just like to address some remarks to the limitations and conditions that might apply to the catering use. I'd like to spend most of my time talking about that tonight. The kitchen is available. It could be rented to anyone, by the way, the definition from a zoning standpoint is food preparation business. It's not catering, but in my mind it's much the same thing. But, you know, food preparation means somebody's coming in, cooking food, and taking it to another site to provide to somebody. There's no proposal for any sale of food in the premises. There would be no retail ever. No one would be allowed, unfortunately for your neighbor, to come to the site for her sake. She can't come and get her hot meals at the church. That would be nice, but it would cause traffic and probably would be much more intrusive.
It'd be more helpful to your legal position, too.
Well, in any case, what we do have is a church that has a separate parking lot and a back parking lot. There are a number of spaces there are plenty of spaces available most of the time. When the church is in use and it's using its facilities or its kitchens, it would not be renting space for such a use. So this is a use that would be made of church facilities when things are quiet and there's nothing else going on. It's a good way to use some of the space. The board may want to consider the intensity of if it were to allow a variance for such a use, it could allow simply a use variance saying you can rent your kitchen to caterers. But the board could also consider a variance with conditions limiting the number of hours per week. Certainly should, I think, look at the hours during the day that such a use would be permitted, because although most comments have been positive, some of the concerns that have been expressed from time to time appear to be related to whether there would be a lot of trucks going in and out at different times of the day. Just really, you know, whether this would increase the busyness of the area, and that's not the church's intention. We can make some suggestions in that regard, but I think it's something that you might want to consider. there is a very onerous permitting process that the Board of Health has for food preparation businesses, which includes looking at all of the kitchen facilities to see whether they're vented properly, whether they have grease traps, and whether they're clean. And they look at the refuse disposal area to make sure that it's safe, secure, and will not invite any rodents. These are things that the neighborhood would be concerned about. So although that the Board of Health process has requirements and will not issue a permit if you haven't shown them that your facilities meet code, I think the Board of Appeals can also look at these issues if they want to, and if they were to grant a variance, they could have conditions relating to them. The Board of Health also requires training for any employees who are going to be preparing food. So it's not an easy process, and I'm pretty familiar with it because the next applicant has already gone through that process for her application. She was new to...
Right, but that's a pre-existing non-conforming use, and it's not a religious use.
It's different, but I'm just saying that it was interesting to me how complicated the Board of Health process is. So many of the concerns that you have are also addressed in that process. That doesn't necessarily relate to the issue of a variance and whether it should be granted, but it does address some of the concerns that might be raised by the neighborhood. So I wanted to ask Pastor Shelley, if it's already been alluded to by one of the neighbors, but if she could briefly address the process she's been going through in discussing with the neighborhood, what comments she's had, and in general, how she sees this application in the context of the church's purpose and the community.
I am Reverend Shelley Davis. and-
Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. And I'm pastor of East Congregational Church, a resident of Milton. I live at 33 Brayburn Road, only a short 1-mile walk to the church. Although the church
Sounds like you
is...
do that often.
Yeah, the church is kind of like a home to me, though. So nonetheless, thank you for the opportunity to have this hearing. And I would just like to say that building and serving community is at the heart of East Church's mission and vision, and has always been and always will be. So the community is in our heart and at our heart. And so this is simply another way that we see to express that. So in preparation for this evening, we did indeed start by holding an open house at the church on Thursday, June 1st from 7 to 9 p.m., which we advertised to the neighborhood by using our now very recognizable sandwich board signs in front of the church, which said very clearly, come discuss our zoning board appeal and for a variance. We also used the email distribution list of the East Milton Neighborhood Association to let folks know we were having that open house, as well as this hearing. And we had flyers that we distributed to the neighborhood for that open house. We then followed that up this summer, especially most recently, by visiting our neighbors door to door, as Bettina, one of our neighbors, shared. And we gathered over 50 signatures of support, which I do have here with me, with names and addresses of neighbors who said, yes, we understand what you're trying to do, and we support your appeal, or your appeal for these variances. I also have with me, oh, and here's one of our little open house advertisements. And then we also have a letter of support from Suzanne Lombardi, of course, proprietor of the 2 locations for the plate. Suzanne also happens to be a member of East Church, a resident of East Milton, living on Pierce Street, was a consultant on our kitchen renovation, fortunately, and that is her letter there. And then we also have a letter of support from Brookwood Farm, correct, Simca? Did you bring that with you? You didn't? Okay, well then I guess we don't have it. Okay, but we talked to Brookwood Farm because they've used our kitchen before and are aware of the excellent facilities that are available and are also in support. So that was the process we went through. I and the other members of my congregation who circulated through the neighborhood appreciated hearing from those in support and others who raised concerns. And we are here now to and eager to respond to any questions or concerns that either the board members or others in attendance may have.
I have one.
Great.
Why did you renovate the kitchen, spend a lot of money on the kitchen before you came to the Board of Appeals to get a variance? Because if we rule against you, the rental from this particular venture is not going to be available to you, and then maybe the kitchen is overbuilt for its use for church purposes.
Well, it was renovated before I arrived. So that might be a question I really can't ask or answer. However, I would say that it is a kitchen that serves our congregation and another congregation that worships in our building now on Saturdays very, very well. So it's a kitchen we know and love and is very useful for large gatherings, whether it be a collation after a memorial service or funeral, or a wedding, or another larger gathering that may come through our typical religious uses. So it's not that it isn't being thoroughly enjoyed and useful. So I don't think it was overbuilt.
Okay.
I think there was a different understanding of what was possible at that time, as Ms. McKettrick referenced. And so I think, we're in the situation we are now because we're trying to seek the variance to hopefully have other uses be available.
Right, but they're commercial uses, and they're not related to religious purposes or to other charitable endeavors, and that's the rub we have
Well,
to face.
let me also suggest, though, that one of the things that we are very careful about, because we need to be because of our 501c3 status, is that all donations made for building use at East Church are earmarked for mission. They are not for operational expenses. And we actually have to do that as a religious and charitable organization.
Sure.
So we are very careful about that.
I hope not.
Well, Mr. Gray,
Thinking of my own religious organization, but can I ask just
Yeah,
one?
of course.
Along your point about the commercial kitchen, as I understand it, the churches are counted under the building code as commercial entities for purposes of the kitchen. So I know that in my own particular church, if we were to upgrade it, it would have to be to commercial standards. So do you have any sense whether your particular kitchen was, I think you've already answered this question, but was it upgraded specifically for this purpose to doesn't really matter, I suppose. But I think if my understanding is correct, you would have had to upgrade it to a commercial standard anyway, even if you weren't, without whether or not you were going to.
even if it was going to be
Even if it was merely for the church
you
purposes
still have to
only.
upgrade it to a
Yeah.
higher specification.
Right. I think that is the case.
Even if you didn't intend to use it for commercial
Yeah,
purposes.
that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, you did say that.
Yeah, that's correct.
I believe that's correct, that, I haven't been involved for years and years. I've been involved more recently, but we've had a lot of discussion about how the situation has arisen. And it's my understanding that the requirements for the renovation related to all of their kitchen uses as a church, and that this was also a side issue that, well, if they're going to spend all this money, maybe, this could be something which they thought they could do anyway at the time, that they could now do legally according to what the building commissioner was telling them. Their understanding was not correct, but they didn't do their renovation just so that they could lease to a caterer. They did it because their own operation was not compliant. The Board of Health regulations are onerous for this type of use.
In terms of, not in terms of dollars, but in terms of time, in terms of use, can you estimate and assume that your lease is allowed and you can go forward and with no promises there? Can you tell me what percentage of the kitchen use would be devoted for church purposes, ancillary church purposes, accessory church purposes, all of which are permissible under the bylaw, and what percentage would be a purely commercial use of the kitchen facilities?
Let me start by saying I found the copy of the letter from Susan Domenico at Brookwood Farms.
Oh, great.
So there you go.
That's
You get that one, too. That's a really good question. At present, because we aren't leasing it out for commercial use, it's all being done. All of the use is church use.
Yes.
What we would envision is a careful screening of anyone who would like to use our kitchen so that we could indeed limit the hours, limit the days to a reasonable kind of use. I do know that one of the small food businesses that we've worked with in the past has a desire to meet with us or to use our kitchen 10 to 12 times a year. So, and for probably, a 4 or 5 hour, sometimes 10-hour stretch at peak times. But again, not like every week, not like 5 days a week or anything like that. I do think that because the space is as good as it is, some would say it's the best church kitchen in Milton. No bragging rights, but I'm just saying.
You're not advertising the
Right, no. Although I am on TV.
We're on TV, yes.
I think St. Agnes is just as a plug-in microwave.
Yeah, right, exactly, no.
Really doing much.
But because of that, we have received requests from time to time. We understand you have a very nice kitchen. We'd like to be able to use it. But I would also say that that I and my church council review those requests so that we could, keep it. I mean, I can't imagine that we would do it more than, 2 or 3 days a week, if that. I mean, it's hard to know because we haven't, we would certainly monitor it carefully, and we don't want to do anything that's going to create congestion or other kinds of issues in the
Adversely
neighborhood.
affect the neighbors.
Right,
or
exactly,
anything like
no.
that.
So I think that's something that we would look at with each request that came our way.
Isn't that putting you in a sense, in the position of the Board of Appeals, and that's something we're supposed to be doing and not leaving to your discretion?
Well, at the same time, I think it would be onerous in a different way if every time we had a request, we needed to come here and do this, right?
Right.
So, because they would be doing that work with the health department primarily, I would think. But
May I ask?
Yes, Ms. O'Donnell.
So I guess my question is how do you perceive this going ahead? Do you, if we're trying to think about drafting a variance with conditions on terms of the hours and the days and the usage and all that sort of stuff, it sounds as if you aren't really sure yet what you actually need. You don't know who you're going to be leasing this to. Is it going to be some sort of a contract that you're going to have with somebody that, is going to be signing a contract with the church to say, okay, I'm using this kitchen for these hours and this time, and that's how you intend to do this? I'm trying to understand how this is going to be structured.
we would absolutely, because for instance, with the Sunshine School, we have an agreement on this is how many hours you're here, this is how many days you're here. And so especially because we use our church, our congregation uses it primarily on Sunday, MAS Seventh-day Adventist uses it primarily on Saturday, it definitely wouldn't be more than Monday through Friday, and it probably wouldn't be every day of the week. But indeed, because it's got to be time to clean it and all of that kind of stuff too. So,
As I said, I'm just trying to get some better grasp of the structure of this.
No, I agree. Let me ask you, Mrs. McKittrick, because it may be something that you can help us with. This whole topic of churches leasing out property for commercial purposes is a matter of great controversy. And there are a lot of articles on it. Some communities have special permits, provisions, they have overlays and everything else. Milton hasn't done that. And I'm told we have something like 14 churches in Milton, churches, synagogues, other houses of worship and prayer. And I guess if we granted the variance that you look at here, how do we avoid being criticized that we're not varying the bylaw, we're rewriting the bylaw? That's my first question. And the Russian school was the perfect example for me, but it's obviously a bad example now, because if you assume that your facility is on the small side, and so the Russian school goes down to St. Agatha Parish, and they rent the St. Agatha school from June to September. And I don't remember the number of students that the school could hold, but let's say it's 750 students, something like that. And so during those summertime periods, the school is rocking and rolling in a residential district, and they're a for-profit business. And so if that happened, how do we make distinctions between the East Congregational Church, St. Agatha's Church? You can't base it on, it's not faith-based. So if somebody says, well, you're letting the East Congregational Church do this, then we have to do it. It's a commercial use in a religious facility that's not permitted by the bylaw, and they're running a catering business there. So why can't you run a school somewhere else? Where do you draw the lines here? And it's not easy, because I expected the Russian school to be going to some other church and saying, well, you allowed a commercial kitchen at the East Congregational Church, so there's the precedent. How do we? It's the only thing that seemed to me, and I'm going to speak very frankly, I don't think this is a permitted use under the bylaw. It clearly isn't. And if it somehow was more related to kind of church activities, or it helped the poor, it provided some affordable services to needy families or something like that, and it's kind of tied in with some type of an ancillary use exception to the bylaw, then it's a lot more comfortable. And as Kathleen said, if we don't have a definition, for example, that of the use of the kitchen, the wonderful facilities in your church, well, it's only going to be used 20% of the time commercially. And so it's really kind of a de minimis use. And maybe technically it's a little bit illegal, but it's a church and they need the revenues. And you can do that. But if we put the whole control of the kitchen facility in the hands of the church, then we've rewritten the bylaw, haven't we?
Yeah, I think in my initial remarks, I tried to suggest that I don't think that's the direction that the board should take, that they can't just grant a use variance. What's the justification? I think you've explained why
it's uncontrollable. That's the problem.
The way this problem was presented to me, and my understanding of it is that it is a minor incidental use. They cannot do it now because they don't have a variance. They do have good facilities because they made the investment. Not every church has done that, but if they had, it would be reasonable to allow a very limited number of hours or a limited amount of such a use, providing all other regulations and permits are met, because the concerns are primarily, that means, you know, it's hard to say that you couldn't have enough parking for one caterer to come in and work in the kitchen, but you have to have off-street parking. You certainly have to meet the sanitary laws, and so on and so forth. We didn't come in, we don't have somebody leasing at present. It's not legal. So I can't come in to say, I can tell you people who are interested, and they're really nice, small businesses. Somebody who makes pies, for example, wants to come in and would like to use the kitchen to make pies a few times, either a few times a year or once a week. We'd be willing to do several things here. We could make a proposal to you for limited hours and limited frequency, and we could talk about what hours during the day would be appropriate. We could come back to you with a possible tenant, but it really becomes difficult when a tenant doesn't know whether they're going to be able to do it, whether they're going to want to participate in the process.
It's as fabulous as you say it is.
But we could do that.
Knocking down the doors.
Well, I mean, there's certainly interest. This has been going on for a number of years, the discussion. The question is what to do, and what to do is come and talk to the Board of Appeals about it and see what they think. I think
why can't you say to the commercial tenant, and we're going to assume that they're going to use, I'm picking figures out of the air, I haven't thought of it. 25% of the use of the kitchen is going to be devoted to a potential commercial use, and 75% is going to be to the church. And you go to the commercial tenant and you say, this is not technically legal, but what we want you to do is why don't you devote 10% of your revenues, whatever it is, to feed homeless people, if we have homeless people in Milton, feed hungry people in Milton. There are groups, there are people out there. Why can't you kind of tie that in so that it tends to be a little more ancillary to your true mission, and you're not purely running a commercial kitchen out of there, even though it's a smaller portion of the time for the kitchen use. I personally would feel much more comfortable if we, as Kathleen was pressing you on, if we had a reasonable limitation. I can assure you Mr. Prondak is not going to run down and see if there was 25%. He's not going to be run down and checking your revenues or checking. And you could put a proposal in that may make it more comfortable, because my concern with this whole business is churches using a decision of this Board of Appeals to devote substantial portions of their assets for commercial businesses because they need the money. All churches need the money. In St. Agatha's Church, they're looking for people to do the boilers and to put on the roof, and they've had substantial donations, but they were looking for more people, and they need it. It would be wonderful if they could say, we're going to lease out our school for 2 months in the summertime and get $80,000 for it and put a new roof on the facility. But you see what I'm saying? I'm not sure that the proposal has sufficient definition to feel
You want to
comfortable.
know, well, I think you want to know who the possible users are.
Yes,
Is that what you're telling
absolutely.
me?
And what the nature of the
second thing is the
use
nature
was.
of the use. I think it would be, I can think of at least one example of a possible user who might very well fit what you're talking about. That's kind of unusual. Most small catering businesses don't make a lot of profit and probably don't have a whole lot of profit to distribute to the community, although they often donate unused food to food banks and places like that. So that would be something that could be addressed. In terms of limiting hours, absolutely, I don't see any reason why that couldn't be done in the context of an application.
But in the scheme of things, Mrs. McGettrick, and I agree with you. I agree with your sentiments, but I know nothing about catering businesses. And for anyone to ask me to start to set up rules and regulations as to a catering business,
No, I'm not.
you would take me to task. I would think you should be making that proposal to us as something that's reasonable with a reasonable candidate to see if you can get the board to make a very narrow and limited exception based upon the peculiar circumstances of this case, because I just do not want to open up a panoply of applications from 13 other churches to use their facilities for concerts, for profit concerts. I don't want to see rock and roll singers down at the East Congregational Church, even though they may pay you a fortune to do it.
May I ask how it would be considered for our profit if we are donating all of the proceeds that we receive for this kind of building use? Because then we are not profiting, we are sharing that revenue that has come into our church.
Well, that's a tax question, and Mr. Gray could
Well, I was
handle
going to
it.
say,
I'm not sure that's
the
true.
business that you're hiring is for profit. That's the commercial
Correct.
entity. So if we were to allow this variance, this use variance, we'd be allowing a commercial establishment inside a residential district. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's what we'd be doing. And
And those revenues would be taxable.
Oh,
Would
it's
they not
definitely,
be?
well,
Yeah.
it's taxable, the real estate's
unrelated
taxable.
business income tax, I think, is what we're looking
No,
at.
but also the real estate would be potentially taxable.
I'm not going down to give
It's
an
very-
opinion on that one,
Yeah.
But that's an issue. It's a
It's a
legitimate
very
issue.
complicated
It's
issue, which
complicated.
would have to be addressed by the church. Absolutely, it's an issue. But I think the central issue is how incidental versus primary is the use. Who's the user? What are the hours? What's the nature of the kitchen use? What kind of business is it? Because one of the arguments I would have tried to make for the Russian School of Mathematics is, and I understand all of your arguments about it being commercial, for-profit rather than nonprofit, is that while it is for-profit, it's a school that has, scholarships and a sliding fee scale for its students. It's open to everyone. It's very popular in the community. It serves a very diverse student body, blah, blah, blah. But they're leaving. And I would say, and I have said to the church, the simplest solution there is to find educational uses that are nonprofit. It's perfect, it works fine, it has for the Sunshine School. I would have said to the Russian School of Mathematics, why don't you form an entity to run this school that's nonprofit if you need to be here? Because it's a lot easier than opening up a can of worms, which is what you're talking about. As far as the catering use goes, I can see this applying, yes, to other charitable organizations, other churches, in an incidental way with the proper limited use, no impact on the neighborhood, something that the community wants. But I do hear from you loud and clear that you want to know who the...
Well, I think that the tricky part I have is the fact that the application says that you want to lease the existing kitchen facilities. I don't think you're looking at leasing. It seems to me you're looking at some kind of a license or some sort of a permit that somebody's going to come in, a couple times a year or whatever and use your kitchen for catering. It's not a lease.
It's not. It's a form of permission.
Giving the whole space over.
No, it would be, it's not defined.
Right, yeah.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree.
License, probably.
We're not giving you a definition here. It could be a license, it could be a temporary permission. There are all kinds of ways you could describe it. Lease is probably the least likely for the catering use. Because the church is not contemplating a huge catering company coming and using the facility all the time because they have too many other uses.
Well, they wouldn't do it. They'd want the lease.
And the weekends,
They'd want the certainty
when the
of
church
access.
uses the kitchens, are the times when many caterers would need to use it. So there's an inherent limitation. So the question is how to proceed from here, because it doesn't sound like it really works to continue the hearing. I think you are requiring that we withdraw. I'd ask to withdraw without prejudice and come back with specifics. I hope you're willing to consider that. However, if you want to tell me tonight, forget it. And I understand you can't give me an answer because you don't know the specifics.
Let's do this. At this stage of the hearing, let's see if the public has anything to say here. Let me do this just to move things along a little bit. Are there citizens out there who are in favor of the church's present application? And if so, just give me a show of hands. Okay, so we've got 10 or 15 people who support the church's application, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense to spend 30 or 45 minutes bringing you up here at this stage of things. And now there are people out there who came to oppose this application. Yes, there's one gentleman there. Okay, just one gentleman.
Well, we're not sure.
Oh, you're not sure?
We needed more details first. I didn't understand the whole thing. The details that we would need is how many people are going to be in and out, which is what you're asking them, and they really don't know. I just don't want people there late at night because our bedrooms are right in the parking lot.
Our house abuts the property. We live at 19 Granite Place, and our backyard, our driveway was right in the kitchen, right at the exhaust system.
You're supposed to come up here and, well, just tell us your name and address, sir.
David Serafine, and I live at 19 Granite Place, and the family house abuts the land. And we've never had a problem with the church. In the future, we're not going to have a problem with the church. But I'm in the business. I work for the Westin Hotel and the Marriott. I work the catering department. And I know what they're trying to say. They're basically saying, oh, we're going to do it maybe 2 or 3 days a week. We have no clue if it's going well. All of a sudden, well, geez, let's do it another day. Let's do it another day. All of a sudden, the person they hired the place to, one of the caterers come in, they're supposed to work, say, from 8 in the morning till like 2 in the afternoon. Oh, we can't because we can't fill our orders till 6, 7 at night. I mean, it just opens up a whole can of worms. And they're asking you to give them a special variance and basically a permit to have a commercial business in a residential area. And you'd be changing the whole of the town. Like you said with the churches. How about if I want to do something out of my house? I build a spot, I want to do a commercial business out of my house.
We wouldn't let you do it.
Of course you wouldn't let me do it. Or you'd charge me a different tax rate.
Well, please, I'm not a tax collector. I'm not going to that.
Not like you do it and tax
I'm
you.
not going there. But do I take it if the use was limited and
But once
it's
they,
specifically controlled,
if you can do that, but at the same time, if it's very profitable, they might want to do it 2 or 3 days limit. What about if the caterer that comes in, what a great spot. They tell their friend, all of a sudden, we want the spot. Then they get an overflow. They're going to screen every single person, and they're going to say no to this person and no to that person. I would think it would expand over time and not just be limited. If you wrote it down, yes, 2 days a week, that's it. 3 days a week from 8 in the morning to noontime or 12, because that area is a cluster anyway with the traffic. That's the biggest cut-down street. We've been fighting that for years, and the town's done nothing. And everyone cuts through that street. I would say in the morning at least 200 or 300 cars cut there to come out on the other side of the square. And now they're going to have trucks coming in all sorts of the day. Picking up.
I think this, one of the comfort levels I have is that we know that whatever specific limitations we put on the proposed catering business, that Pastor Shelley will adhere to those scrupulously, as would any minister, priest, rabbi, imam, or anybody else in Milton, as opposed to running a commercial business and saying, well, if I can make an extra $10,000 here, I'm going to lease this out over the weekend. So that doesn't bother me. The question is really drawing the lines and having something much more specific. So I thank you for coming. Mrs. McGettrick, do you want to come back up here for a second? We're getting bombarded here by bees and flies. So do you think it would be more appropriate to withdraw the application and then come back with something more
Yeah, I mean, the only
specific
downside of
and-
that is, we'd have to pay for another ad, that's life.
Well, we can continue this if you wanted to. We could do that, it depends.
I'm not sure it would be in the scope, because, you want specifics, and we didn't provide them. And I don't want to, what do you think as a board? Do you think it's outside?
It would be specifics that would be
yeah.
relative to the conditions that we would be
Yeah.
putting into the special permit.
Right.
So I would be
Well, then I would
comfortable.
suggest that if you were willing to continue it, that you give us sufficient time to see whether we can come up with specifics in terms of a possible not tenant, but, possible person.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had some better idea about a business plan for this idea, that sort of said, okay, the kitchen space, these are the people that, the kinds of types of businesses or whatever. This is kind of what we sort of propose. I mean, you don't know now whether or not, somebody's going to come to say, I need it, 6 days a week or 5 days a week or 2.
Well, we actually do have 2 specific businesses that are actually represented here in the public that could speak to that. But I also could say that if we were willing to continue this tonight, I mean, we could establish like a 25 or 30% limitation on the use of the kitchen, that it would only be, and actually Sunshine School uses the kitchen for snacks, so it's really not available in the mornings anyway. I mean, so it would be, we're already looking at basically limiting the use to being between noon and possibly 10 o'clock, but if you think it would be better to back it up to like 8 o'clock, we could look at that. But I mean, like I said, we also do have representatives here from businesses that have contacted us, and actually one that has used it before the health permitting was granted for a while and then wasn't granted. And if you would like to hear specifics there, I mean, those are very small operations. Those are the kinds of businesses we would be interested in engaging, because we don't want a lot of additional traffic in the church. We want to be able to support incubator-type businesses or those that already are intent on staying small. We really have no interest in having some large operation taking place in the church.
I will just throw out, and I said it before, I think the closer you can come to an accessory use and then tie in some charitable use, or element, a charitable element to their commercial activities, the better off you're going to be, because under ordinary circumstances, I would take the position that what you really should do here is go to town meeting. I know what's going to happen when you go to town meeting. You're going to be there for years, and they'll have study committees. But we have to be very careful here. I've read the cases, I've seen the instances, and we have to be very careful that we're not criticized by either the selectmen, because we're not elected, folks. We're appointed, okay? So you can't, if you disagree with our decisions, then you can talk to the moderator. But you can't vote us out of town. And I'm very concerned about establishing a precedent that somebody is going to say, well, now the Board of Appeals is rewriting the bylaws for us under a subterfuge. And, we're not afraid to make exceptions and to grant variances, but it's something that's got to be very tightly controlled. Otherwise, other churches may seek more commercial activities than you are willing to do, and they're going to say, you allowed them to do it, how about us? And it's a slippery slope. I just don't want to go down there. Nick,
Can I just wanted, I don't know whether this is, I'm thinking about other commercial entities that operate near residential things in town that have had to come before the board for a special permit to continue operating. There's a long list of conditions that usually get added into those things. And I think about some of the issues that arise when there's a commercial thing going on near residential. And I'm trying to apply that towards this particular proposal. And I know that I'm assuming that the commercial kitchen must have an exhaust fan over, right, okay. And again, we're getting down into the weeds, but I wouldn't be surprised that if the particular type of catering business that you have contracted with, at least two, makes a particularly powerful, pungent type of food, that smell wafting through East Milton's neighborhood might not produce happiness among the neighbors. So why am I asking? So that was sort of one of the issues I was thinking. I mean, I'm just thinking about what can go wrong. There's something in the bylaw about noxious odors proceeding, and I don't know that it necessarily had this in mind, but I could see that would be, a nuisance at law, that you've got this thing going on. It's interfering with my quiet enjoyment of my house next door because you're spewing smoke and, So could any proposal that you come up with maybe take into account that particular aspect? You see what I'm saying? I'm just, but that along with time and the traffic and the noise and all of that is the smell.
But I think if you're going to ask for this board to
I know they live on Belcher Circle.
to draft that type of specificity, you're making a big mistake.
I don't think we were. We were going to try to suggest, but really from the discussion tonight, I can see that you need us to give you more detail for you to make any decision. If you're willing to continue this, I would appreciate it, in order that we can work on this and see what we can come up with. We can always come back and say, we're going to withdraw without prejudice. We just can't do it now. We won't waste your time, I promise. But I think that makes sense. I think since you do have possible users who have specific types of cooking that they would do, I do understand, because I've done site plan approval where all of these issues come up. I think we're talking about a sort of a small form of that.
I think we are, and as I said, if you had some kind of thing that said, okay, this is the sort of agreement we're going to have with somebody, we could include a provision, as Mr. Leonard has suggested, that some percentage of the fee that you collect or whatever is going to a mission of the church. Obviously, I understand. At full disclosure, I live on Belcher Circle. I'm not in a butter, but churches, as we all know, have expenses, and it's diminishing population all over the place. So anything that is being done, I understand, is being done to support the mission of the church. And it's certainly better to have a church in that spot than something else. So I'm sensitive to the idea that this is some kind of an outreach that a church has to do in these days. But if there was some better understanding of what kind of an agreement you would have with a potential caterer, I think that would help.
I think that would be a good thing to come up with. I think
And
we
it's
can
almost
look at
an-
all of the issues that come up.
It's on an experimental basis, and I think if,
Limits, if you were to consider granting something like this, when we come back with more detail, I think you could do it for a limited time period and come back and look at it again. Those are all possible ways to be careful and not to allow something to get out of control. And I mean, the same sort of thing you would have to consider, I think, at other church sites, and so for that reason, you need to think about it
but
carefully.
it may be that Mr. Clark or town meeting wants to
will be a zone.
start to weigh in on this a little bit and amend the bylaw or give some guidance since this is such a preliminary thing. But it has a dramatic impact on the church. And if you start to propose new zoning bylaws, that's an expensive and time-sensitive matter. So let's proceed slowly and sensitively. Marion has done a wonderful job here tonight. Get some specifics for us.
Yeah, and I'll
and we'll
give
see
you
what
the
we can do.
specifics on the residential use.
What are you looking for in terms of time, Mrs. McKittrick?
What do you think?
45, 60 days?
Oh, we can do it, and we'll have it for you tomorrow if you want it. Seriously, I mean, we just needed to know what more you needed. This will not take us long.
Okay.
Well, you always schedule about a month out, though. I know that.
Okay.
So
I feel
likely it would be-
comfortable with a month out with September 23rd. What did you get for us?
We're already booked for the 12th and the 19th from September.
Early October? Oh, yeah, well, I don't know what we can do about that. I don't know what to do about the Russian school issue. The fact is, they've been allowed to be there. They were kind of waiting to see whether you would grant permission. They're going to be out in December.
We'll talk to Mr. Prondak about that. If he has an issue, I can't imagine he would have an issue on it. He certainly hasn't mentioned this application to us.
It hardly seems worth the effort to try to come up with a rationale when they're leaving in 3 months.
Right, and by the time he does the enforcement action, the 3
Okay,
months will be up.
so if there's anything you can do in that regard, it would be helpful. We don't want them to be booted out tomorrow because they need to prepare their new site.
We'll talk with Mr. Prondak. If it's an issue, we'll get in touch with him, Marion.
Okay, thanks.
What do you say?
We have the 12th and the 19th already booked. I don't know what looks good for you.
You know what your schedule is.
I can look. That's probably, what day are we looking at? Sorry.
26, 27?
This is September, 27.
How's the 26th or the 27th?
September.
I'd
What day of the week?
prefer a Tuesday.
Tuesday or Wednesday?
Tuesday, Wednesday?
Yeah, I can't meet on Tuesdays. I don't think.
I sing
I have
on
to
the
pick up.
27th, but I sing on
Wait,
Wednesdays.
the
but-
hearing would be, I have to pick up at 7.
Yeah.
It would be tight. 7:30 is going to be tight. I
Yeah.
might be a few minutes late, but I could do it.
On Tuesday.
It's a pain, but if it's necessary, I could.
Would it be worth doing at 7:45?
7:45 would give me more time to get back from West Roxbury.
Like that would be better.
Tuesday was better. Wednesdays I have rehearsals, but I mean, I can start skipping them.
I don't want.
45?
Okay.
Tuesday, the 26th?
Yeah.
Did you say 7:45?
Yeah.
Well, or I'll try to be here by 7:30. It's
What
just
time does it start?
I have to pick up
Yeah.
the kid in West Roxbury at 7 o'clock. So I then have to get back.
Yeah.
So the child. Yeah.
7:45 sounds good.
7. Well, it's John's schedule. 7.
That's fine. Okay, look at Tuesday, the 26th
It'll be tight.
at 7:45. And Mrs. McGettrick, if you have your proposal and you could get it to us like a week in advance.
At least a week ahead, yeah.
That would be,
Fine.
okay, we'll do it in the blue. But Mary, that's the only case on? No, okay, don't start assigning other cases. I'm in Springfield at the beginning of October for 2 weeks. So, okay, so
I appreciate your
we're going to continue this hearing September 26th, Tuesday, 7:45 in the Blue Conference Room.
Thank you.
Thank you, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for
Yeah, that's fine. Rehearsal's important.
at least in the beginning. Once I know it, after that, I don't. Quite the crowd.
And now a different case.
Yeah, but this one's easy. This is pre-existing.
Pre-existing non-conforming. This is-
Your room, you can sit in the audience. Yes. So whenever the board's ready.
Most of the decisions are death on that type of application. There's a lot of articles on it, and they usually have special legislation to permit it.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with the whole idea. Just because it's commercial within the...
Yeah. Well, there's that whole Attleboro case that just came down, La Salette Shrine, on the taxation where they sold the, property to Mass Audubon, and that was only on the real estate taxes, not on the leasing situation.
One more?
Yes.
They didn't bring cookies either.
And they could have.
And
You're right.
presumably there are cookies downstairs. I'm just kidding, it's fine.
Hello, how are you? Hi, I'm well. Sure, nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie McFadden.
Hi, Liz.
I live at 15 Wildwood Road.
Okay. What percentage of your business are you going to devote to charity? Most of it.
Mount County Charity.
Yeah.
Okay, just give me 2 seconds here, because if I get the papers mixed up, it's going to be, not going to be fair to people.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh. Is this older?
Let's go to you.
Yeah, okay, this is, you just clean it up and that's it. All right, thank you. It's very helpful.
Okay, we all set for the third hearing? Okay, we're going to call to order our third hearing. This is the 8 o'clock hearing at 8:57. This is on the application of Stephanie McFadden and the Falcone Companies. It's dated July 7, 2017, and they're seeking a special permit from the zoning bylaw. They propose to use a portion of the second floor of the building located at 7 Pleasant Street, Milton, for cooking operations for a catering business.
Sounds like a dirty word right now.
You're going to be talking to Pastor Shelley and put in an application for the kitchen?
No,
That'd be perfect.
I think it's a little bit different.
yeah, a lot different.
Yes. And so here, non-conforming use of buildings and lands, which is the subject property. This is a non-conforming, pre-existing non-conforming use. Maybe it has a religious aspect somewhere you can tell us about, but if it doesn't, that's okay too. Those changes can only occur if authorized by a special permit by the Board of Appeals. This property is located in the Residency Zoning District. My memory is it's Ben's Cookie Factory that's known and beloved by everyone in Milton. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. To my immediate left is board member Kathleen O'Donnell, Nicholas Gray immediately to the right. The rules are the same as the other hearings. Speak up nice and clear and loud so we'll get an accurate transcription. We'll hear from the applicant, questions, people opposed, people in support, and we'll make a decision on this. I've read the advertisement. We have the application. We have the denial letter by Mr. Prondak. It's dated 7/5/2017. We have an exhibit showing the various tables in the proposed premises, and we have some plans. Exhibit A showing the kitchen and other amenities, and we have a plan of land by Morse Engineering of Situate. Dated August 12, 2016, showing the subject property in relation to the public ways and a right-of-way into Pleasant Street and Randolph Avenue. So without further ado, we have Mrs. McKittrick back, both on the developing a catering specialty. Maybe you'll...
Great to be here. So yes, I am Marion McKittrick, and I represent the applicant and the owner of the property, Falcone Properties. The Falcones bought this building January of this year. Yes. Is that right? And they have, since they purchased it, been cleaning the building out, basically, sort of looking at what they have. They're pursuing some legal aspects of their ownership that they need to determine before they decide what to do with the building in the future. So they're looking for uses that they can do now. So what they've done is they've found a new tenant for the cafe, which is operating on the first floor. That just required a new set of permits from the Board of Health. It did not require any new zoning because the building currently has a pre-existing non-conforming use as a bakery and retail operation. It's one of the oldest manufacturing buildings, continuous buildings in the United States. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's a very unique property, and I think valued by a lot of people in Milton just for the feeling that it gives the town that we have something still in existence like that. And we all know it is Bent's Cookie Factory. So it's nice to know that there will still be some cooking going on in the building. The first floor cafe does some cooking, baking, and so forth. Stephanie McFadden has a catering business, Cooking In with Stephanie, and she's been looking for a place where she can do her cooking. So this looked like a good prospect for her because the building is already a pre-existing non-conforming business use. The building inspector has determined that her use does require a special permit. It's an additional type of use, although it incorporates some of the existing use, which is retail bakery. And this won't be retail, but it will be, there could be bakery as part of, cooking, baking things. She has also had to apply to the Board of Health for her permit, and she's submitted a full application. They are waiting to proceed with their process to see what the Board of Appeals says tonight. So if you decide that this is a reasonable use to permit, then they'll do their site visit and they'll complete telling her exactly what the requirements are. She's aware of some of them, certainly. So Stephanie's business, well, first of all, just to back up a little bit, there are also special permits that have been granted for additional uses. The first one was 1995, and that was for the cafe use on the first floor. In 1999, the Board of Appeals granted an amendment to that permit to allow outside seating. It was to be a 2-year permit, and they were supposed to come back, but they didn't. And then in 2009, they did finally come back to the Board of Appeals, and sort of with a mea culpa, we never reapplied for this outdoor use, even though we've been seating people there all along. And the Board of Appeals decided to grant a new amendment for the outdoor seating for 5 years duration, and at the same time, they granted a special permit allowing an apartment use on the second floor of the building. In 2014, the owner returned to the Board of Appeals to ask for a continuation of the outdoor seating, which was granted, so it is now good through June 2019. So that first floor cafe is fully permitted and legal. The second floor bakery operation was where they made the hardtack and other things. It was very old. It needed a lot of cleaning up, and some of the equipment clearly could not be used any longer. So Falcones have taken out all the,
It's off to the Smithsonian?
I'm not sure where.
One piece is, we had to say. The rest of it was no good.
But there is a kitchen area, so Mrs. McFadden is proposing using that kitchen area to do cooking for her catering business. She does most of the work herself. She might, on occasion, bring in one or two people to help her. She has a big job to do. But basically, the impact on parking for this use is negligible. It will be possibly one parking space, maybe two. There is some parking beside and in back of the building now. There is on-street parking. And there already was a bakery use in the second floor of the building that would have generated at least that much employee parking. So it isn't a change in terms of parking impact. It's a use that, while there will be some improvements to the kitchen that will be required, is completely enclosed in the building. There are no exterior changes proposed. And in fact, I think the Falcones would like to keep the exterior of the building looking the way it does from the front, no matter what they do in the future.
Does it have to because of the historic nature of the business?
Doesn't have to,
The
but-
house is not, or the building is not historic?
Because the town doesn't have historic districts of that nature. But because it's on the National Historic Register, we certainly, everybody in town certainly cares about this, and so I think it's great that Falcones bought the building and want to try to see if they can use it and still have it look somewhat the same from the front. Hopefully, they'll find a use for the building that will generate enough revenue so that the building can be properly maintained, and it will be an asset to the community. So what I'd be asking you to do tonight would be to permit this new use, the catering use. There is, I think, just a requirement that a grease trap be installed, because this will be general food preparation, not just baking, and the Board of Health will require a grease trap underneath the sink. The employees, as I mentioned earlier tonight, employees have to have had the proper training to do this type of food preparation. Board of Health reviews that. The facilities have to have the proper hand washing, separate washing areas so that everything will be clean and sanitary.
Which is there.
And it's there.
It's all present. Nothing's
Yeah.
changed other than the old stuff is gone.
It was basically there, but the equipment is being replaced with more modern equipment. Let's see if I've got anything else. Right. Before the notice of the hearing was mailed, Mrs. McFadden tells me that she did write to each abutter. These are the abutters of the abutters within 300 feet, and there are a lot of them, explaining her proposal, offering to meet and discuss her plans. She hasn't been contacted by any neighbors. That doesn't mean they're not here tonight. Maybe they have comments, but we have not heard back from anybody. And I would just say in closing that this is a low-impact use, very similar to the pre-existing retail and bakery use. It should have no negative impact on the neighborhood. It's a really suitable use for a portion of this large building while the new owners evaluate the property and prepare long-term plans.
Can you explain the kind of food what you're preparing so they know? You explain that like it's not doing full meals.
Well, it's different kinds depending on what people prefer. Trays of different pasta dishes or chicken, roasted things that would be roasted in the oven. Definitely some baked goods, fresh food, fresh fruits, appetizer type things, some desserts.
And what are the types of functions that you cater to?
Oh, more bridal showers, first, second, birthday parties, graduation parties, communions, Christmas party.
Are they mostly local in the Milton area?
Yes, I would say 95% are Milton customers. Mhm.
Can you do the delivery?
And-
Not any trucks coming?
No, exactly. I do the delivery, or occasionally I will have someone deliver for me, and it's Milton delivery. Food is taken out of the refrigerator, put right into the car in insulated bags, and brought right to the customer.
And it's heated in the restaurant?
They
if
would
it
heat
has
in
to
their
be heated?
home.
Oh, they heat it in the home? And you don't get involved in that? You don't get involved in servicing in the
No,
home or
no. It
anything
comes
else? It's drop
cooked
off?
and ready to reheat with instructions.
So you don't get anything back? You don't get food waste back or
No,
anything?
I get nothing back. It's put in disposable foil-type trays or plastic containers, and I don't see it
Like
again.
restaurant takeout.
Exactly.
And how long have you been doing this?
5 years.
Well, I think maybe we should continue this hearing and
For 5
get
years.
some samples. Make sure that we think this is a...
Example myself.
Mrs. McGetrick, do you have anything else to say?
I don't. I actually talked to both applicants tonight about free samples. Well, not Stephanie so much, but the church, because they had I told you, a pie business that wanted to use their place that makes delicious pies, but I said, no, that really wouldn't be appropriate. Sorry.
Okay. Let me see, Ms.
I don't have any
Do you have any questions?
No, believe it or not, nothing.
Let me see if there's anybody out there in public land. Is there anybody who has any questions regarding the application? Yes, sir.
I live next door.
Okay, come on and tell us your name and address.
Jerry Fowler, 672 Randolph Avenue.
672 Randolph.
He actually lives in the house that used to be Ben's.
Yeah, we real close. So I can reach out when my window's in touch.
Yeah.
The factory.
You can.
Oh,
So
good. Welcome to the board.
thank you. I'm in support of the business. Sounds awesome. I just wanted to know. I got a couple questions. With the special permit or the rezoning, is that what it is? Is it
No, it's just a special permit because it's a pre-existing
Is there any
non-conforming use.
long-term repercussions, say, based on the rezoning or the special permit, say 5 years from now, of what can take place?
Well, we usually issue the special permit for a term of years. I don't know whether we didn't really discuss that. But if, for example, Stephanie's business moved elsewhere, and if this kitchen was too small and somebody else was to come in there, then they'd need a special permit as well. Because any changes
It doesn't
to a
open.
pre-existing...
All right. So it doesn't open the floodgates for...
No. If somebody came in and wanted to run, I don't know, Reed Fortunes or something like that, well, they'd have to get a special permit for that.
All right.
So you're protected. You'd get notice of any change.
That answers my question. My next question is just hours.
Okay, I would say typical hours for me are mother's hours, school hours, 9 to 2, 9 to 3.
All right.
Certainly, if I was very busy, it was a holiday time or a communion time, I might work longer hours, or possibly a Saturday morning before I had to deliver something out. But those would be the hours that
Yeah. Is it
those
just,
are my current hours.
it's just
So-
like a Monday to Friday thing? Or
Monday to Friday
Yeah,
thing,
okay.
yep, exactly. Like I said, there are 2 communion Saturdays in this town. Usually those mornings I work until about 10 a.m. Like I might come in, and it's just me, I'm very quiet.
Yeah.
And I would just do whatever I needed to do before delivering for like a 10 o'clock communion type
Gotcha.
scenario.
All right.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming.
I'm out of questions.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let's ask, is there anybody else who wishes to speak in support of the application for special permit, and there's no such person present? Is there anybody who has any questions of the applicants or Mrs. McGetrick, or who otherwise wishes to speak in opposition to this application for special permit? There's no such person present. Do you have anything else you want to add, Marion?
I don't.
Okay, we're going to end the evidentiary portion of the hearing, discuss the merits here and now. Mr. Gray, do you want to be here?
Sure. I like it. I think it's very much in keeping with the prior use of that space. It's sort of in the same zone. I don't think it's going to, it seems pretty clear it's not going to have an adverse effect on the neighborhood. Most of the activity is going to take place within the 4 walls of the building. There's not going to be a lot of traffic or parking or whatever, issues. It's going to be 1 or 2 people, and there's already some space there. So I think it makes sense for what you need for the building, and given the fact that this is already a building that's been used for that purpose in a residential area for a very long time, before the zoning bylaw.
I just wanted to say that actually I represented Mr. Fowler when he purchased his property, so I just wanted to make full disclosure of that. But assuming that that's not a bar to my discussion, I do think, I agree with the general sense that it doesn't have an impact on the neighborhood. It keeps the building occupied, which is a good thing. And so I don't have any questions about it. Now I think we have an understanding about what the operation is.
Okay, well, I agree with my colleagues. I think Mrs. McGettrick has presented a wonderful application, as she always does. I agree with what my colleagues, their sentiments are. I honestly don't know how you do it. I don't know how you can run a one-woman catering operation. I have difficulty cooking breakfast in the morning, let alone doing all this work yourself, but you must be very skilled and dedicated and experienced in order to run a one-woman catering operation. So I say 3 cheers for you. Congratulations. All those in favor of granting the special permit as requested?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so congratulations on your special permit. We'll get it out as quick as we can. Thanks for coming, and we're sorry we kept you so late. Next time, bring business cards and samples. Kathleen, you want to do this one?
Sign?
Yeah.
Where do I?